Cue the theme music.
All right, we are live.
Okay.
All right, hello everybody. Welcome to the latest installment of the Fireside chat series that myself, John Chodacki, and Cameron Nayland are doing as part of the Open Publishing Fest. Today I have Bruce Caron, from one of the founders of EarthArXiv with us. EarthArXiv is a preprint community, and just first I want to thank you, Bruce, for taking the time to chat with me today. Yeah, we've crossed paths in many different places. I remember working on data rescue a few years ago, and CSV Conf, ESIP, just various open science discussions. But maybe real quick, do you mind? I don't know if you've ever told me, how did you get your start in open science and in research?
Yeah, so I finished a PhD in anthropology in the sort of mid-90s, and immediately realized that I needed something to do as an anthropologist that didn't include anthropology so much. So I got a job programming, which is a good skill to have as an anthropologist if you want to avoid a lifetime of food service or personal transportation. So that was in a small company that had a NASA grant, and that got me into this group called ESIP, Earth Science Information Partners. And then I started a nonprofit to continue the work we were doing to build data-rich learning tools for education, and tools that connected directly into the NASA data archives, and then the NOAA archives too, and that students could use on their computers in their classroom. And then with ESIP's a very wonderful organization, in part because it had benign neglect in its founding. NASA, started it and funded it, and said, "You guys are supposed to govern yourself. Go govern yourself." And so ESIP members, and there were like 36 of us at the time, spent a year and a half and a long time, a lot of meetings, building a governance system that would serve us well, and we own it. And for 21 years, ESIP has been self-governed, self-managed, and constantly improving what it does by reflexive, self-work. And it's a total member organization. So I can recommend it highly as a model for online science organizations. And then after ESIP, I was active in the digital library work from the NSF. There was DLISI, the Digital Library for Earth System Education, and then the NSDL, the National Science Digital Library. And both of those sort of came and went. And in part, they went because there was really no effort to build governance, I think. And so at the end of it all, there was nothing to preserve. But in that, in working on that, I decided I would really focus as an anthropologist on doing the anthropology of open science. And I've been doing that ever since.
Yeah, actually, my undergrad was in anthropology as well, and African studies.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I laughed at your comment about food services and what do you do with the degree, but it does seem like a lot of us that are thinking about the future of research and research communication come from that kind of humanities and social science backgrounds, thinking about how the culture change is part of the whole change.
Yeah. And, I've been to so many big, meetings with hundreds of people and top, managers from funding agencies and foundations who stand up and say, the changes we need are half social and half technical. And they always say that. And wow, that's true. Okay.
Yeah.
And then the funding comes out and it's all technical. So, we have a lot of social work to do. And so it's so I'm sort of Mr. Governance, and that's what I've been doing lately. Really, I'm trying to write a book on open science governance and culture change. And now that I'm stuck at home anyway, it's a great time to do that.
Yeah, I mean, you were bringing up ESIP. I mean, I think it is a great model in the sense that a lot of the initiatives that happen in scholarly communications, at least in recent years, have been coming from the publishing and library space, but ESIP is a great example of where it comes from the researcher space, like thinking through how to support research by researchers themselves. Yeah.
Right.
And then when you talk about governance, that's like one of the main things people say when they talk about governance, like self-determination, self-governance is really important. So it's a great example of how that actually happens.
So that led me into thinking of the commons, and the early work with Force 11 on the scholarly commons, and before then, work with, I remember beyond the PDF, the meeting down at UC San Diego in 2010.
Right.
And I was in a metrics breakout, and we argued and talked and discussed and figured everything out. And finally, at the end of it all, Cameron Nayland just looked up and said, the only real metric is reuse. And when you think about it, that's a great cultural statement, because if you're doing your work so it can be reused, you've already changed the culture from what we have now, which is where it's not ready for reuse, to something that really opens up your work for all kinds of new uses and new knowledge and people to use it. And it's a perfect way to optimize the use of open repositories in the future. So I think that is the metric.
Yeah, I mean, it is a very nice provocative statement for sure. I wonder though, like, if you think about archival work and the idea of bringing together the outputs of a society, or from a research discipline perspective, you think of negative results, and you think of kind of building a corpus that captures what we have created and what the future might hold. I mean, reuse is important because it does help with that culture change, like you're saying. I think our challenge is trying to find other ways to build metrics and meaning as well.
Sure.
Yeah.
But I think it's a good model for a kind of metric that leads to new practices, and new practices lead to new attitudes. And that's really how organizational cultures change. The other thing I've noticed in working in the academy and with the academy in different arenas is that they don't listen to folks outside the academy. There's a whole bunch of organizational, institutional culture change, governance, management work being done out there, out in Silicon Valley, out in the sort of startup world. That's really important, and I think really useful. And I think it's good to have people who can, look at that literature and bring that into the academy too.
Yeah. I mean, I think that goes both ways, actually, because, I mean, we live in California, and the startup culture doesn't really look to research as more than just, something to exploit or science. And it's like really valuing it is something that I think technology firms need to think about, valuing our opinions in the research world as well.
Sure.
Yeah.
I also think that librarians are key team players moving forward. It's not just because of COVID, of course. It's because that's how science finds what science knows. And librarians have always been in the middle of that conversation, helping new scientists discover what they need to know right now. And so that's why we're so happy to be working with the California Digital Library now.
Yeah. I was just talking to my colleagues. So I work at California Digital Library. For those watching, I was talking to my colleagues about a CNI roundtable that happened recently, and the report just came out about, it was a roundtable about research continuity during COVID. And one of the conclusions in there that they wrote was, the last 20 to 30 years, the investment that libraries have made in digital infrastructures and supporting digital infrastructures is really starting to show and highlight the values of libraries in general during this crisis.
Sure.
And that is, I mean, it's really where I work, and it's what CDL does. And so it was a great example of how, like, during this pandemic, it's libraries that can connect the research and research outputs, and the investments that libraries make can be a place that we can build from collectively.
Yeah, and I have to bring in a call. I love what Bruce Caron is doing at the Internet Archive during COVID. Opening up digital books for people to check out and find in this time when you can't go into a library safely. So
yeah, the same is happening with HathiTrust. They've rethought their model. I mean, it's a lot of innovation comes from this for sure, but it's a lot that's created because there's been years and decades of investment, and that's something that a lot of people forget, but that's great that we're now seeing that. So let's talk a little bit about it. I mean, there was news yesterday about EarthArXiv. You helped found EarthArXiv. Right. But maybe before we get into that, can you just talk a little bit about how you got into preprints specifically? I mean, there's a lot of work you were doing in open science, but
right. Well, I've been looking at the issues of publication, and it's almost like publication these days is kind of a privatization at the same time. So we really need to open up things. I was looking. We got some funding from the Sloan Foundation a while back to do an experiment in poster commons, academic posters. You think there are these things that have always been around, but before 1970 there were no academic posters. So academic posters in general, they mark what Cameron again would say is a failure to scale. With meetings, instead of just having more meetings of the same size, you had this one meeting and half the people or 90% of the people only give posters. And now, in the US, every year we spend 4,000 person years making posters. And globally, we spend a couple $2 billion doing posters. And all these things are ephemera, basically. Figshare does a good job of, hosting posters a bit, but it's nothing at the scale. I mean, we have over 1 million posters generated a year.
I was thinking the innovation in the poster industry is actually that you can now get fabric posters. Yeah. It's like in 2020, the innovative approach to posters.
Yeah. Well, the nice thing about that is you can sew them into masks for your COVID use. Yeah.
Nice.
So posters got me thinking about other kinds of commons, and at ESIP, way back, I don't know, probably 12 years ago, someone had the idea that we should do our own internal commons, and people could put a variety of things that they've generated, objects that they've created into this commons. And we built it on Drupal, and we had it up there. And then after a few years, we decided, well, this is the wrong granularity. It's the wrong place to do this, just in ESIP. And I was talking to people back a ways back. Remember when Nature had their preprint service, the Nature Proceedings, and that came and went? Again, having a publisher be the home for preprints didn't make any sense either. So that's probably the reason that one failed. And so we were saying, okay, well, let's jump in. I was up in Seattle at the Sage Assembly in April of 2017. And thanks to John Wilbanks, who kindly got me an invite. John has been a wonderful, open science guy for a long time. And I met Matt Spitzer, who was working as a community guy for the Center for Open Science. And he says, we're just opening up the open science framework for preprints. And I thought, okay, now's the time when we can do our commons in a better place. And so that started a conversation at ESIP, and we talked with PeerJ, and we talked with PLOS, and we talked with Figshare, and we chose the open science framework. It seemed to be more complete at the time, and the people at the Center for Open Science were just wonderful about helping us get this up and running. And so it kind of became a proxy for that commons. so Tom Narek was at ESIP at the time, and he sort of took the lead for this cluster, this little group. And Matt said that Chris Jackson at Imperial was really interested in doing this, so he got involved, and we just started there, and we spun it out, and so it started in the fall of 2017, and we have over 1,400 preprints and postprints in the service right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so you were mentioning earlier the news about the move to California Digital Libraries infrastructure. So I know my colleague Catherine Mitchell has been working with the full EarthArXiv team on that move, and you're leveraging Janeway, which I know is a project that's been championed by Martin Eve and others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Maybe you can talk a little bit. What are the goals of that change, so that move that you're making?
Well, Catherine, I think approached us when she heard that we were moving, and the CDL has been doing e-scholarship for some years now, and
yeah, I don't even know how long. A very long time, yeah.
Right. Building out digital platforms and formats that campuses can use to move their journals to a digital format, and have backup repositories, have everything that a journal would need without having a publisher involved. I think now they're moving into monographs too, which would be great from an anthropology side of things. So we got in a conversation. Several other groups also offered to host EarthArXiv, but the CDL team was informed and enthusiastic, and they asked us all these really hard questions, and I think we gave them the right answers. We're really transparent. Talk about governance. We have a governance scheme where we put a broadcast out on Twitter for anyone who would care to be in the governance, and so we have several hundred people who've said that, and then every 2 years, or I guess every year now, because we staggered the terms, we run a lottery to pick the new people. And we use different buckets in the facets, in the lottery, to make sure that we're getting a distribution of people from different places, different disciplines, different times in their careers. So it's a very representative group. And they come on board and they start working, and it's been wonderful. And we use Lumio as our decision platform on the web. And this is, I have to say, I've tried Lumio 3 or 4 times. This is the one time it really clicked, because we have people from, 3 different continents making decisions on Lumio.
Yeah, Cameron and I actually, how we started this idea around Fireside chat series is we were both judges last year at the Open Publishing Awards, the predecessor to this festival going on, and we use Lumio for the decision making of that awards as well. Yeah, it's a great open source tool for people if they're interested. But yeah, it's ambitious to run something global and also that distributed. So from an open governance perspective, congratulations.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it's one of the value of having an anthropologist in the mix. I think about this stuff all the time. So California libraries have just taken this really huge lead in open publishing, and that's one of the reasons that we were so attracted to moving there. Is that not only are they serious about the work in general, they're serious about open platforms and open source and open sharing. So we're really looking forward to this new opportunity. And UC has a lot of Earth Science in several different campuses, including UC Santa Barbara, and the people down here are really excited about this move too. Definitely.
Yeah, it seems like a great, full circle from the beginning, the idea of, researcher-led projects. great partnership between campus resources that then extend beyond the campus.
Right.
Yeah. So then what is the future? Like, what are you thinking, with this? There's obviously a lot more opportunity for expansion or discussions about next steps for EarthArXiv. What are some ideas or
we want to disrupt, the publishing world in earth science to the point where it's valuable to put in null results. It's valuable to put in software papers. It's valuable to make comments and promote sort of post-publication peer review on the site. So we'll be working. First we're going to get the minimum viable platform going, but then we'll be working with ways to where authors and readers can add value to the content of the site for the authors and for the community. And so I think using Janeway with the Django framework and the availability of new features to come on site later on is really, really important. And I think it also builds on the idea of an ecosystem for open science. And I know you and Cameron have both been active in thinking about, how do you build an ecosystem and not really just take the most available, solution to your problem, which may not be the best solution in 20 years or 100 years. So, I think that's something that open science publishing and libraries working in open science need more conversations about. So I hope that you and Cameron and others will jump in there.
Yeah, I was thinking about your comment about CDL. I know, like, the team that Catherine Mitchell runs, the publishing group. Most people don't even know that libraries publish. That there is such a thing as a publishing library. But that's at the same time. I mean, the projects she's running are very innovative. They're pushing the envelope on what new systems or new solutions are available or can be developed for not just library publishers, but publishing in general.
Right.
Yeah, it's a great incubator.
Yeah, it is. And I think everything that CDL does in Janeway will go back to the Janeway software repository, and be available to everyone else too.
Yeah.
So, it's a very good model, I think, for others.
Yeah, I know one thing I know you and I have talked about is this idea of diversity of approaches as part of the healthy, aspects of like a healthy ecosystem of scholarly communications and research support. And I like this conversation about how we're going from, the journey of the different platforms and the different solutions that you have brought in along the way, and that there are others, and that there is this diversity. And I think very often those conversations tend to want to have a conclusion that one of them along the way was the final solution. Right. And I think that it's really great to see how it's actually a journey, and that we're all building off each other, and that actually the diversity amongst these solutions is actually the positive.
Yeah, and that having several I don't say competing, but complementary services feeding different aspects of this is really a way to be more resilient as a community. Mm-hmm. And we're really happy that it's not just the UC libraries, but a lot of libraries are stepping up as institutional repositories for things that are sort of a little more than what they were expecting 5 years ago. So I think preprints are really lightweight, actually, as objects. We work with data centers that have several petabytes of data, and you can have 1 million preprints in probably 100 megabytes, so or thereabouts. And so it's not like that's the big load. It's not like the actual platform is that difficult. So it's something that a lot of different organizations can hop into with a little help from places like the CDL as pioneers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so we were talking a little bit about integrations and kind of how you can then, with solutions like this, think about building reach through integrations. So I mean, I like the idea of kind of pairing this like social collaborations with technical integrations as like, that's a big piece of how you create a really diverse, healthy ecosystem. Is this like, it's this culture change and this technical change as well, and collaborations as well.
I think right now too, we're at a, we're forced into a reevaluation of the value proposition of a lot of things we do, right? Or we have done every year for whenever. I mean, Cambridge University just announced they're closed next year. I mean, which is probably, if you look back, they were probably closed in the, in the 1660s. They were closed during the Black Plague too. Right. So, I mean, it's this thing where we have to, and places like the American Geophysical Union, which has been wrestling with, the whole, opening up the publications and Project S and getting past the, having a business model that's not subscription reliant. And now their meetings, they have meetings that have 15, 20,000 people going, and most of them doing posters. And they're probably not going to be able to meet in December in Moscone for that. But maybe it's time to think about not having meetings with 15 or 20,000 people. Maybe it's time to think about other models for the 21st century about how we do things. And so preprints is just, a leading edge of, I think, of a lot of changes that can happen for the better.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I just want to say thank you for taking the time. Those sound like great parting words, but any other parting words that you would?
Well, I just want to say that Cameron was right. I mean, reuse is a great metric. Reuse is not a metric you can gain, really. I mean, reuse is when other people find your work valuable and use it themselves and figure out, the provenance of your data and the, how the software runs and everything. It's a great goal to have. Culture change is necessary for open science. We can't get open science really without culture change. And we can intentionally and reflexively change the cultures of our organizations. Or we can decide that, our organizations are doing obsolete things and we can't make obsolete things better to solve our problems. So we create new organizations. We may be in the point where we're going to discard a lot of organizations that have been around for a long time and we're really happy with, and maybe sad to see them go, but we'll be happier in 10 years if we're doing something else.
Well, thank you very much.
Thanks, John.
We'll talk soon. And everybody, there will be more Fireside chats throughout the next week and a half as part of the Open Publishing Fest. Check the schedule on openpublishingfest.org, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Sean. It's been great.